In this episode, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris goes on driving home the faith and delves into the moral, legal, and social implications of surrogacy, focusing on the commercialization of human reproduction, the risks involved, and the impact on children. This discussion highlights urgent issues that demand public attention and ethical scrutiny.
With us now is Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris. Dr. Morris is an economist and the founder of the Ruth Institute, a global interfaith coalition that helps Christians defend the family and build a civilization of love. Her most recent book is The Sexual State: How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Our Lives. Dr. Morris, welcome back to Driving Home the Faith.
Thanks for having me on, Ken. Good to be with you again.
Well, it's good to be with you as well, and I understand that you had a little bit of weather-related travel travails last week.
I did. I left the South against my better judgment. I left the South and went to visit my daughter in Boston, so I got to see my daughter and my grandbaby, who almost took her first step, so that was pretty exciting. I didn't want to... Yeah, I just needed to see them. But the big blizzard came through. I was supposed to leave. I forget which day it was now. You know how it all fades in the background. But I ended up being there for a couple of extra days, which turned out to be fine because I got to see more of the baby. And I'm back on time to be with my buddies in Cincinnati. So what do we got to talk about today, Ken?
Let's talk about something that you and I both feel extremely passionate about, and that is surrogacy, the crime and the moral abomination. I'll put my cards right on the table right at the outset because honestly, Jennifer, I don't know of any public policy issue that is more urgent and, in my mind, more clear than the problem of surrogacy. And I say I know that we both feel this way because you've written often about surrogacy, including a January 26th column this year in the National Catholic Register, Surrogacy Gone Wild Treats Babies Like Orders to be Filled. And you specifically in that piece talk about Chinese people entering into surrogacy contracts in the United States, as you call them. Well, you're citing a Wall Street Journal piece in which you talk about ultra-wealthy Chinese nationals siring small armies of offspring around the world through surrogacy contracts. Now, surrogacy is illegal in China, as you point out in the piece, and so they're entering into these contracts in the U.S. And this is not people who are interested in having a child that they can cuddle and hold, but rather people interested in literally purchasing children based upon certain genetic factors and certain history of the surrogate donors.
You're singing my song. Well, I mean, it's that story. There are so many interesting things about that story. And since I read the one in the Wall Street Journal and wrote that article for the Register, I just earlier this week read a very long piece in New Yorker magazine, of all things.
Yes.
And it's interesting that both New Yorker magazine and Wall Street Journal, for different reasons, you would think would be very sympathetic with anything that allows autonomous people to do whatever they want, because generally that's how they think.
That's the
but
rule.
Even these guys are creeped out by what some people want, know. I mean, and so the journal article was really focused on, a handful of extreme cases, what you might think of as extreme cases. This guy who literally wants to create a dynasty of people to take over his video game empire. And so he purchased expensive eggs, from donors that had all these characteristics that he wanted and so on. And he placed an order for 100 children. He wants to have 100 children. Mm-hmm. And he has used multiple agencies to arrange to arrange all of this, right? Because there are agencies that will match you with the egg and the gestational carrier. And of course, this man who wants to be remembered and is siring this offspring, of course, it's his divine sperm that is being used, right? I mean, the ego here, is out of control, really badly out of control. But anyway, the journal talks about how it goes beyond the usual gestational surrogacy agencies to be this boutique agency that provides all sorts of services, including picking the baby up from the hospital. You don't have to do anything. And what the man wants is a whole army of great sons, who can carry on his business. And you think to yourself, what about these kids? Who is thinking about these kids? Who's raising these kids? What is their identity? What kind of freedom and autonomy are they going to have?
Yeah. You also wrote a piece on the Ruth Institute website in January, and exactly asking about. Well, actually, I'm looking back. This is 2022, so you've been thinking about this for a long time. But you I really, one of the things that I love talking to you, one of the reasons I love talking to you about these things, and including the Greater Than campaign that we've talked about a couple of times, is your focus on children. More than any pro-life advocate that I'm aware of, and more than any anti-surrogacy advocate that I'm aware of, or more than any opponent to same-sex marriage and transgender ideology, you always bring it, and it's not to say that other people don't, but you always bring it back to the children and to the care of the children, identity of the children, the nurturing of the children, and surrogacy. And that's why I said at the outset, is there anything worse, short of abortion itself? Because you're literally taking that child away from its mother the moment it's born and handing it to someone else.
Right.
And oftentimes, of course, and we haven't talked about this specific twist to it, oftentimes, of course, it's a same-sex couple, and almost always, it seems like, at least the ones we read in the press, it's a male same-sex couple showing off their designer baby as though it's a cosplay accessory rather than a child.
Yeah. And the reason for that is that the men, the two men, I know this will shock you and your listeners there in Cincinnati, but the two men do not have a womb between them, so they have to go rent one.
So we've been told that some men do have wombs. So I'm glad you cleared that up for us.
I'm sorry to have to break this to you, but what you see, the other side of it, the female couple, the lesbian couples, and I've been following these issues for a long time as well. The female couples purchase donor sperm,
right?
And it's called donor sperm, but it's a sale, okay? And
yes,
and again, I've been following these issues for a long time. The children are exposed to unbelievable and unprecedented risks in these procedures, okay? Because you find cases where the sperm that you purchased turns out not to be the correct sperm, or your baby gets mixed up with somebody else's baby. That doesn't happen when the baby stays in mommy's tummy,
Exactly.
And when the sperm is deposited by the father, the intended father. And this is the other thing, the language, the commercial language that enters into it.
It's all transactional,
There's not mother and
Yep.
father. It's intended parents, okay? It's intended parents. There was a case some years ago that I wrote about. There was a sperm bank. This was a sperm bank mix-up.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a mix-up. It was a guy who wrote amazing things about himself. And then it turned out that, and so a lot of these women and same-sex couples chose to use the sperm. He was a PhD candidate, and all of these great things that he could do, and so on and so forth. And then they're starting to see problems in their kids. 10 years down the road, their kids are having mental health issues and stuff like that. And somehow they found out about this particular donor. Well, the donor, none of what he said was true. I mean, he had mental health issues. He was living in his parents' basement. He'd had run-ins with the law. It was a whack job, just to, not to put too fine of a point on. And one of the ladies said, I would have been better off picking up a hitchhiker on the side of the road than going with this guy.
Goodness.
But then when you really think about it, the sperm bank took no responsibility. In the small print, it says, we can't guarantee that what the guy says is true.
Yeah.
Okay, now, I think I'm an economist. I think about incentives. What incentives did we just put into place here? A man can go, excuse me, I'm going to say this, it can go relieve himself into a jar for money, right? And then write his own self-description.
Yes.
And have never be responsible for anything, not what he says, not for the care of the child, nothing. But he can aggrandize himself and never be held to account. Now, what kind of a person do you suppose is going to be drawn to that kind of arrangement? I think we're selecting on narcissistic personality disorder people. You know, I mean, it's like, what normal person is going to do that?
Now, we're just about up against a break, and one of the things I want to do on the other side of the break is start by talking about the sale and purchase, because it's interesting it's important for listeners to understand that you've talked about the sale of semen and eggs, but really we're also talking about selling children. And there's another name for that, and we'll talk about that, what the other name for selling children is, after this break.
If you're in the market to buy or sell your home or office, but want to use a realtor who supports your pro-life values, you can rest easy when you select a realtor from Real Estate for Life. They are a worldwide network of pro-life real estate agents who will help you buy or sell your property. And the best part is, they'll donate a portion of the sale to a charity, like the Ruth Institute, at no extra cost to you. Find your local pro-life realtor at realestateforlife.org. And remember, select the Ruth Institute as your charity of choice.
I'm back now with Jennifer Roback Morris talking about surrogacy, something that we both feel very passionate about. And Jennifer, before we went to the break, you had talked about and used the language of commerce, because that's the language that's used, of selling eggs and sperm. But as I said before the break, it's also about selling children. And what's another term that we use for selling children that if anybody puts it in these terms, everybody is against?
Well, trafficking.
Exactly, and this is
the other term, of course, is slavery.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
right.
For crying out loud, hasn't America had enough problems with buying and selling humans? I mean, stop.
I just have to say this, because I have said, and I've said it, I've tweeted it on X, and I've written about it, and I've absolutely made that comparison, is that this is not different from chattel slavery. Now, I will say this: what you choose to do with the human being that you purchased is different, perhaps, from chattel slavery, but the transaction itself is absolutely identical to any slave market in 1860 in South Carolina.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I made this point in my article in the Register, because it's a really important point. Most people who are purchasing, who are engaging in these contracts, they want babies for pretty good reasons. They're numerically speaking, I'm sure that's true. But what I want, and for sure, the people who are conceived in this way, the children who are now old enough to hear us on the radio,
are made
for
in
example,
the image and likeness of God, with the full dignity that all of us have.
100%. It's not their fault. There's nothing wrong with them. But what I do want those people to see is what is hiding behind you. You, the child, you're on the cover of the brochure that the IVF clinic gives out, that the surrogacy agency gives out. Your smiling face when you were a baby. Mm-hmm. But you, with your trauma of not knowing who your father is, or of being separated from your gestational mother at birth, whatever complications that you've had in your life, none of that is ever revealed to the purchasers back there at the agency. Right. And it is certainly never revealed to the public that there are Chinese billionaires who want to have 100 children for reasons of their own, and there can be all kinds of reasons that people would want to do this. And, let's be clear, there is nothing like a home study that is done for adoptive parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Oh, it's the Wild West.
Any knucklehead can walk in there. Any pervert can walk in there. Yeah. Any crazy person can walk in there. And if I'm going to have a baby with a man, and I am encountering him, and we're going to do it in the old-fashioned way, there are some built-in limitations on that. Like, he should probably shower before I encounter him, and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're weeding out the undesirable behavior because you want to please each other in order to do it together.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
But when somebody's doing it in a jar, and then somebody's picking it out of a catalog, and then somebody's doing it on the lab table, or all those steps are breaking down the human encounter into these different commercial transactions, there's no screening. None of that screening is taking place.
And you know
right?
what's really interesting about this, in my mind, is that the United States, and this is it's not unlike the transgender issues as well, is actually out of step with the basic thrust of most laws across Europe. For example, in Italy, surrogacy is absolutely illegal. There is no period. There's no leeway. And in many other countries, it's either highly regulated or illegal. Now, I will say this: in the United States, there are no federal laws related to surrogacy, so it's all states' laws. And most states in the United States will enforce surrogacy contracts. Now, some have laws on the books that expressly permit surrogacy and regulate it to some degree. For others, it's just a common law contract, and the court will either enforce the contract if there's a dispute or interpret the contract if there's a dispute. The only state that I'm aware of that in which surrogacy is completely illegal in the U.S. is Louisiana. In every other state, it's legal, although in some states it's somewhat regulated. But all you have to do, of course, is go to a state where it's unregulated or go to a state where it's legally protected, and that's how you get around that.
Right. I'm not sure it's completely illegal in Louisiana.
Okay.
I think it's highly regulated because but nonetheless, your point is completely valid. It's pretty easy to skirt these regulations. And
exactly.
The point I like to make to our libertarian friends, because a lot of libertarians think this is great, it's just the market.
This is the essence.
And that's why I was glad about the Wall Street Journal, frankly. Because they would tend to be towards
free
that
market
camp.
libertarian kind.
They would tend to be in that direction. But here's the thing: this is a so-called market that cannot exist without the state. And here's why: the product you're purchasing is undisputed parental rights to a child.
Yes.
That's what you're purchasing, the child of your choice.
And the state enforces those rights.
The state enforces those rights. If the sperm donor thinks maybe the lady will come after him and want child support, he's not going to do it. He's not going to donate. Without the state severing the parental rights of the gamete donors, okay, without them enforcing the surrogacy contracts. And some of those contracts are pretty ugly. We could go into that, and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes.
But without the state enforcing those provisions, this breakdown of the natural order, the natural coming together of man and woman, that breakdown could not take place without the power of the state making it happen.
Yes. We've been speaking with Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris of the Ruth Institute. Dr. Morris, we'll post your NCR piece to our website at sacredheartradio.com. Thanks for being with us, and I can't wait to talk to you the next time.
Thanks a million. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.